Thanks for joining me. I am Pastor Kathy Graves, one of the pastors at Trinity Lutheran Church in Mason City, Iowa, and a part of the Faith and Wellness Outreach Ministries. I want to share with you about the spiritual discipline of listening to others. Now, you might not think that listening to others is a contemplative practice. Often we think about that more in terms of prayer or introspection. But true listening really does take practice. And when we give it to another person as a gift, it can be transformative. If you're like me, you think your life is full of a lot of listening, but in all reality, oftentimes it is more hearing. And my husband would say oftentimes selective hearing. But intentional listening is very different. For example, ironically, it is oftentimes the people with whom we are the closest that we have the hardest time really listening. One of the scenarios that happens in our house is the assumption that I know where a conversation is going. I find myself interrupting with another train of thought or a conclusion that I've come to without really listening to what the issue is at hand. Sometimes I react to the people I love the most out of some kind of narrative that I have created in my head from past experiences, rather than really listening to what it is that they are saying. Similarly, I can be on a long monologue about something that I consider to be important to me, and someone will pick up a particular detail that they think that they need to correct because I got it wrong or was misinformed. I end up feeling like they weren't listening at all, but instead were just thinking about their own opinions. Today's propensity for multitasking, whether it's with activities or devices, has also decreased our skills for deep listening. Whether it's with people you love or strangers that you're meeting for the first time, listening is harder than you might think. When I feel anxious or insecure, I can get defensive, and my inner dialogue is more about what it is that I can say, or what I can say that makes me look good, or triggers a personal story that I think it is that I want to share, rather than listening to the person. When someone comes to me for help, I can easily get hooked into the ego boost of coming up with a solution out of my own need to be helpful rather than their desires or needs. All of this is human nature and part of having personal interactions. Good listening is important anytime, but not every conversation calls for listening to others as a contemplative encounter. That would be a bit strange. As a spiritual discipline, it involves mutual agreement and intention. There are times when someone seems to be stuck, when there's a significant disagreement or a hurt or a break in a relationship has occurred, or when one is feeling lost and alone, that listening that goes beyond body language or eye contact or open-ended questions can be really important. Listening to others as a contemplative practice is not only an awareness of how we are present to each other, it is also an awareness of how we are present to something that is spiritual, holy, and sacred. So what does this look like? Well, for the speaker, it might look a lot like any other conversation where one is honest and vulnerable. For the listener, it takes more discipline. Listening to others actually grows out of other contemplative practices, such as centering prayer or Lectio Divina or journaling, whatever practice it is that helps us to be better at listening to ourselves and listening to God. Because listening to others as a spiritual practice actually has a lot to do with what it is that we are doing with ourselves. First of all, it is to center yourself, to be fully present in that moment with that other person. That might happen through prayer or silence or taking deep breaths. Put aside any agenda or preconceived ideas about where it is that the conversation might go or should go, but instead stay with the person on their journey of where it is that they want the conversation to go. Quiet your inner dialogue. When you are reminded of another story or a personal experience or an action that might be helpful, hold it. Put it on the shelf in your mind. It might be useful, it might not. Wait to see where the Holy Spirit is guiding. Even if there is silence, don't necessarily insert your thoughts unless they will help the other person go deeper in their own self-discovery. When I was training to be a spiritual director, I remember equating listening to walking in the woods with my dad. When we were going through thick brush, sometimes he would forget that I was behind him and I would get slapped in the face with a branch. I wouldn't want to go any further. But at other times, he would hold the branch and wait for me to catch up and see more clearly what was around. Someone who is listening holds up the branch, waits patiently for the other person, perhaps is curious about what they are seeing along the path, and hopes that the person who is speaking will come to their own conclusions as they arrive and take hold of the branch. Attentive listening gives permission to a person to be who they are and where they are in the moment without judgment or agenda. As a spiritual practice, listening is about awareness of holy connections, care, and curiosity. I sometimes imagine everything being said as though it's being placed on an altar between two persons and before God. It is holy. There is a choice to pick up what is there or to leave it there on the altar. If it seems to have some energy for the speaker, be curious to learn more. If it's dropped quickly or avoided, the listener might consider if it needs to be picked up to see if the speaker is ready to look at it more closely. Better listening to others is something that we can all try to do in simple ways. Put away any distractions, internal or external. Don't interrupt. Hold back with your agenda, your opinions, or advice. And as a spiritual practice, it is becoming more aware of the sacred in our everyday lives. It's incorporating silence, reflection, and connection with the holy at a heart level as individuals. They are all ways that we can practice skills that assist us in becoming better listeners with others. And if you're feeling alone and like no one is really hearing where you are at, it might mean finding a spiritual director who will listen with you so that together you can hear the rustle of the Holy Spirit in your life, and together you might discern where God is leading you to take the next steps on your spiritual journey. May God bless you on this journey.